Night shifters, ever witnessed a paranormal activity? If so, what was it? I worked at a 7/11. One night I kept hearing what sounded like a little girl crying. But the store was completely empty. Whenever I'd go to the area where I thought it was coming from, I'd hear it from somewhere else. Never go out alone when you hear a crying child. It's an increasingly common ploy that bad people will use to lure women, and men too, come out into the dark so that they can do stuff. Usually they use a recording. But there have been instances of people using actual children, I think. I don't have a story. But here is the one my wife likes to tell. She is a nurse and for a couple of years she was working night shift in the palliative care unit, which is the comfort care end of life unit. Patients in that unit are expected to die, or to be sent home or to a care home to die. Anyways, those rooms also had a radio. And according to her it happened a few times that a radio suddenly turned on. And within an hour or so a patient would pass on. One rather busy night, the radio turned on and my wife went into the room, stared into the darkness and said, "Cut that out. I don't have time for this shitty." And the radio suddenly snapped off. No patient died during the rest of her shift, but one passed away shortly after she clocked out. I'm picturing Death raising his bony hands up like, geez. Okay lady. A lab building where I once worked was the site of a murder-suicide, which happened while I was there. Awful and sad. We didn't have shifts per se, but I had to work late one night autoclaving equipment for the next day's experiment. The autoclave room is right next to the lab where the event took place. I hadn't seen anyone else in the building. After I started the load, I was about to leave the room when I heard a crash outside. I immediately opened the door and saw that all the contents of a table in the hallway had been pushed to the floor. Water bottles, a packet of papers, pens, etc. Since I was right by the door at the time, I would have seen and or heard someone running away. It was against protocol to leave things in the autoclave overnight, so I had to stay an hour and a half to get them out. But nothing else happened. I left the stuff on the floor, though. Didn't want a repeat of that. I work the front gate at a military installation. The night shift is super dull and quiet where I am at. For a while I noticed this dark green old Ford Bronco that would roll up. When I would stand out the gate shack, the car would do a 180 and leave. This happened about 2-3 times until I finally caught the license plate before it turned. I ran the numbers to my supervisor. He asked me if I was sure. I said I'm 100% certain. He tells me it couldn't be because the numbers led to a vehicle crash report that involved the exact same vehicle and plate number to which the driver had died in the vehicle and the vehicle was totaled. That shit made me want to switch to days. Used to work at IHOP. A cook before my time got shot and died during robbery. I would always hear someone in the kitchen such as the spatulas clanking but nobody would be in the kitchen. Once I saw a black figure in the back, figured it was the cook. When I went outside to the front of the restaurant, the cook was sitting outside smoking. There was no current orders either. Other co-workers experienced some stories. One of them said she felt pushed, but I can't speak on what I didn't see. Man, I would be pissed and haunt people too if I ended up dying at a f***ing IHOP. I was on CQ, charge of quarters, while stationed in Germany. At about 2 AM, a Dachshund came in the building, summer, so doors were open. I followed him down the hall to get him out and he just vanished when I was about 6 feet away. It was unbelievably real. 10/10 would hallucinate again. When a patient buzzed and asked me to ask the person behind the curtain to go away. That's when you say no you and then hang up. I was working at a gas station at like 3 AM one night. A car pulled into the pump. Guy got out and started pumping. And then the car and dude just vanished. I was looking right at it. And it just popped out of existence. I told my boss the next day and she turned white as a sheet. She'd seen the same thing. Same exact description. Same car. Same pump. Same guy. What a shitty way to spend the afterlife. Repossessing cars. It's about 2:30 am. Me and a buddy in the same car. Corner of Route 70 and 571 in Lakewood, NJ. A 97-98 Honda CR-V pulls up in the left turn lane. She had no face. Like no face from that bad 90s Dick Tracy movie. While working at a psych ward. Every morning at about 2 am there would be the sound of someone running down the main service hallway. Followed by the same door at the end slamming. One time I kept a close eye on the area, but when I was distracted for a few seconds the footsteps began, but when I got to the area there was nothing. According to one of the managers, it had happened for several years. Always at the same time every morning. And most believed it was a ghost of one of the deceased clients. Another time. All the battery powered wall clocks in the unit spun around a few times simultaneously. That WAA freaky and everyone in the area screamed. I work on a boys unit at a mental hospital. Recently my patients have been complaining about seeing ghosts in their rooms at night. Claiming they've seen things, coloring pages and art they've taped up, fly off the walls. Doors open and close by themselves. And a few patients have claimed to see full body apparitions. Given their age and psych status, I'd usually take their stories with a grain of salt. But actually I sort of believe them. The hospital opened as an asylum in the mid-1800s. And patients have definitely died there. Much of the original building is still used, including my unit. And honestly, when I walk around the halls at night, hours after the patients have fallen asleep, it legitimately does feel like someone is always watching me. I think it's just a matter of time until I have my own ghostly encounter. A patient in one of our hospital rooms kept talking about spirits and demons. She was discharged a week later. The next guy who was admitted to that bed told me he sees spirits. And a big black lab was lying next to the bed. My black lab died a couple years ago. Then he said he's very in touch with the spirit world and laughed. I see dead people. Patient asked me to hide her cinnamon roll cause the kids would steal things and keep her up all night. Month later these kids are running around and I go to find them and they disappear. I left that job and came back years later and my dementia patient would be up all night talking to these damn kids. Pretty minor things. I was a custodian in ICU, 2 nurses and me on shift, and it pretty empty most of the time. I have 2 stories. 1. During my shift as I was cleaning the empty rooms. Every minute or so out of the corner of my eye the shadows move. Pretty WTF moment the first 2 times. 2. We had a brain dead patient ready for organ harvest. It was me and a nurse in the room when she froze. I ask if there is something wrong and she says I know that's impossible but he just moved pretty scary. PS. He didn't. I interpreted night shifters as something akin to skinwalkers for a second and was very confused by this question. I work the night shift in a hotel. It's a pretty old building so lots of weird stuff happening. What stands out in particular is that there is a very creepy statue, which one night was gone. I asked the morning receptionist why they had removed it. She seemed confused. We checked and it was there again. I swear it was gone during the night. Next shift I could make a picture of the statue if anyone is interested. It's a very creepy statue. Early morning opening a warehouse I was a manager at. No one else there. Has a motion sensitive alarm that I have to disable when I open. Lock the door behind me. Went to go take a dump. I'm in the stall. And I hear the door open. Hear footsteps go from the door and hear the stall next to me open and close. No feet present. I finished and stayed in the break room until someone else arrived. Grandmother's house at night I would hear footsteps in the attic. And then dishes in the dish rack would be moved back and forth. My mother has heard someone calling her name in one of the rooms. When no one is home. Grandma's friend came over and saw my aunt's ex-husband standing in the dining room. He died in the house 2 days prior. I used to work the early shift making bagels, 3 am. and would sometimes see things in the reflection of my oven that were running around behind me. They looked like chickens. I told a co-worker about it and he took me in the back where we stored the flour and pointed at the ceiling. It was completely crusted with some dark brown fuzzy looking substance. He told me the building we were in was once a chicken processing plant. Thousands of chickens had died right there. The stuff on the ceiling was blood and feathers. Once I worked security for an event at the Queen Mary. I've heard the stories and such but tried not to believe them. Tried. My area was empty and my shift wouldn't be over for another 2 hours. It was dark, cold and there was nobody around. Everyone was busy dancing and enjoying the music in the main hall. A man in a suit was walking toward me, smoking a cigar. When he approached me, I told him this area was no smoking. But I didn't smell anything. When he walked past me, it got really cold. He continued down the corridor and I just kind of shrugged. When I looked back, he was gone. Vanished completely. There was still 20-30 feet for him to clear and he definitely didn't sprint the rest of the way. Was visiting a supposed murder site in some woods in Colorado with a friend of mine. We were there for all of 5 minutes before my friend stopped me short and said aloud, "There are 4 shadow people moving towards us," and points in 4 different directions. I looked to the right of us, the only side that had any sort of light, and I watched a shadow jump across the light into a bush. It then pulled itself out of the bush and began to jerkily stagger towards us. Straight up looked like something from a Tool music video. Stooped, jerking erratically. Solid black with zero discernible features aside from a kind of lumpy human-esque shape. Edit. There's this sighting only a handful of times at my work where many describe her as a girl in a red dress. We've had customers ask us who the new waitress with the red dress was, only for us to be like, "Ma'am, we don't know who you're talking about." A very recent occurrence was our new chef. 63-year-old man was in the back getting some bags of frozen food, whatever we needed at that time for the order, and turned around to see someone on the other side of the room looking at him. My manager walks in and says he's white as a ghost. He turns to my manager and back at where the lady he described as being in a red dress. She's no longer there and he's got goosebumps all over his arms. I'm not saying there's no other explanation for this. But what the hell's going on at my work? My father was transferred to a remote location, a less developed state with a lot of tribal population. Everyone we knew said that when they first came to that city, they had nightmares for weeks. My family, my dad's colleagues, friends, everyone. I didn't go. I was the only one who didn't. Maybe people who are more superstitious experienced it. IDK. Psychologically influencing yourself and others. STH like that? I've told this elsewhere before, but may fit here better. I did security on night shift for 3 months. One of the accounts was an old building that got renovated after being vacant for so many years into an assisted living facility. Everyone in town swore it was haunted, but no one could actually say yes or no. The doors were also alarmed so it would call out over the radio which ground floor door was opened. One night I just got done calling into base that rounds were good, when suddenly the alarm for one of the doors went off. The nurse and myself got to the door within 30 seconds and it was not opened. It was still locked. No one was outside. We shut the alarm off and I called it in. We did a full top to bottom sweep and room count. All residents and staff accounted for. Base calls in to make sure we were clear. Still no way to explain it. Because you literally had to unlock the door and open it at least 1 foot, 30 cm, to even trigger said alarm. I work at a Walmart. When I started working apparel on the night shift, the others in that department started trying to spook me with tales about it being haunted and yada yada yada. I didn't really care. I grew up in a haunted house so ghost stories didn't bother me. And then we actually experienced something. I was like, huh, neat. But one of the ones who'd been trying to spook me freaked right the FCK out. It was hilarious. She and I had been standing about 5 or 6 feet apart. talking to each other. The store had closed at midnight and we were the only ones in apparel. Right between us. Both of us heard a female voice as clear as day. I only heard a voice. But no words. My co-worker said she heard words. But she was so freaked out she never told me what she heard exactly. Dunno if this counts as paranormal. But when I was in pediatrics as an intern, I'd get a surge of patients exactly at midnight. Every damn time. Like bloody clockwork. Something else. Not really paranormal. Just science. Heart patients usually decompensate around 2 to 3 am. Few years ago when I was working in a casino. At 4 am when the casino was closed we found one of the slot chairs laying on the ground. These chairs are quite stable and heavy as all hell to accommodate so many people sitting in them all day. When we looked at the surveillance videos, the chair is up against the slot machine then just leans back and falls over onto the ground. None of the legs broke and we couldn't find any damage. That was the talk of the casino for a while. Damn. I was staying at my hostel room while one night after I felt like someone touching my hair and moving hand throughout my face but thought it was my roommate. But when woke up, my roommate was not there and later next night I saw some strange figure in my room door while entering from outside and it was creepy. I once saw a submission on Fallon hashtags. SB had a job as a caretaker of a cemetery. They would mow grass and the mower would stop working stall every day in front of a particular grave and it scared the hell out of them. One night the call lights at the end of the hall and rooms with no patients would just randomly turn on. When we went down to look, lights in the room were on too as well as the closet. It did that on and off all that night. So I will share an incident shared by my aunt. She's a matron and one night while she went inside the mortuary she met with lots of punches but the source of the punches was invisible. We all could see the bruises on her face. My aunt who was cooking in friend's home at 8 PM passed out immediately after she saw two shadows on the ground talking to each other and she said she couldn't understand anything. I was babysitting once and her and I were in the living room watching Annie. We were munching on popcorn. Enjoying the sleepover. Her two older brothers were out for the night. So we head to the kitchen to top up the refreshments. And on passing by a kind of games room, the den, we notice one of her brothers stretched out on the sofa. Legs crossed watching a movie. I could see his glasses. Socks. Full outfit. We called to him many times. Nothing. Jokingly threw a soft toy at him and nothing. Both of us went pale and had that tummy drop feeling. He was just a frozen image. No natural breathing movements. Just like a projection. We ran into the living room. Turned off Annie and got into each of our blankets to sleep. The two brothers returned home hours later and it still freaks me out. A new job at a kitchen in the next county over. Kind of a long drive. I heard the crew discussing routes and one night I decided to take what I thought was the road they were all taking. Big mistake. I ended up getting chased around by some mountain man in the middle of nowhere on a pitch black curvy ass road to the hills. It was just another new guy following me because he thought I knew the shortcut. I know the most logical explanation is that some crackheads are so skinny they can just squeeze into some really tight spaces or hiding spots. Dot. But when a skeletal, half-naked hobo seems to materialize right out the darkness into the middle of a spotted light from the street lamp, cackle and ramble about impending doom, then f-king vanish into a knee-high bush, I'm inclined to assume the parking lot is haunted by its very own gremlin. I was working at an assisted living facility on the dementia unit. The place was originally a mansion that had burnt down. When it burnt down, 2 children and their mother had perished. Now back to when I was working there when the elderly were towards the end. The veil between our world and the spirit world is thinned. My one resident came out of her room hysterical. She said there were 2 young children that were looking for their mother. Me fully believed her and told her I would try to help them to try and console her. I got her tucked in and calmed and trying to hide my uneasiness. I go sit in the office and then another resident says this lady keeps calling for her children and Dick was annoyed.